Hi and welcome to the Beer Temple. I am Chris Quinn, going solo yet again, but I promise that will be changing soon. We'll have Margaret on here. I know you guys like it when it's the two of us doing the show, so I promise we will be doing that in the future. But for now, it's just me talking about pumpkin beers. And kind of like with the last show about Oktoberfest beers, I did a pumpkin show last year, but again, like Oktoberfest beers, there's so many of these beers, and it's such a seasonal style that all come out together. I figured I could easily do another episode with completely different beers from last year, so that's exactly what I did. Like I mentioned on the Oktoberfest show, again, go on to the craftbeertemple.com site and you can look up the beers that I tasted last year for the pumpkin show and compare them. Maybe in a couple of years from now, you know, if the show's still going on, I can maybe even do a best of the best and take kind of the best pumpkin beer from every year and yeah, see how they compare. I mentioned in last year's episode a little bit about pumpkin beer. I'll do that again here. One of the really truly American born styles of beer. I mean, obviously we have the Imperial insert name of beer here, and that's an American style. You know, we're bigger, badder, and you know, every style can be made into a double or an Imperial. But historically and in colonial times, pumpkin beer was something that was brewed. So it is kind of cool that it's kind of come back into vogue and they're being brewed again and people really clamor for them, and I think it's great. I really like the style and it's kind of fun. It's a sign that fall is coming. Of course, these beers do come out earlier and earlier. You kind of wish they were around in October, and a lot of times some of the harder to get beers, pumpkin beers, are already gone by that time. But you know, beggars can't be choosers, and you know, for right now we've got some really good ones. Why pumpkin beer? Well, because oh, I think my mail's here. Why pumpkin beer? Because in colonial times, or you know, the early Americas, a lot of times they would run out of barley. At first, all the barley got shipped in, and then later on they were growing their own barley, and then there were, you know, hard winters, I guess, where they were running out of their grain, and they would use any sugar source or starch source that they could, and that meant going on to other grains primarily, but then later they would start going on to other fruits and vegetables. So it wasn't just pumpkin, it was, man, I think they were doing turnips and potato and anything they possibly could to get something to kind of bolster the grain bill. And some of the, I read some like old letters and stuff of people referring to pumpkin beer, and people even coming over from England and saying the pumpkin beer in particular was really excellent, and some were saying that it was as good as anything you could get in England. So from the get-go, I think pumpkin was one of the beers that, or one of the vegetables that lend itself well to beer brewing. Nowadays, you're not going to ever see a pumpkin beer where all the fermentable sugars are coming from the pumpkin. My guess is really the pumpkin is there only for flavor and doesn't really lend anything to the final alcohol. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain that that's the case. I'm also would love to know if anyone actually did brew a pumpkin beer where it was just, you know, all the fermentable sugars are coming from the vegetable. I think that, you know, their definition of beer back in colonial America was very different than ours. These were table beers. This was because traditionally the English were petrified of the local water and thought water was unsafe to drink. Even though in America we kind of had, you know, very pristine water sources, they still didn't want to touch it. So beer was just what was drunk by men, women, children. And because of that, it was very low alcohol. It was about 2% alcohol. And I read somewhere that it's almost impossible to get drunk off 2% because your body can process the alcohol about as fast as you would consume it normally anyway. So you really maybe would get a slight buzz from it, but it was very different back in those days. So I don't know if a 100% pumpkin beer would really work. moving on to the beers that we have here, you know, since it is kind of a New England style of beer traditionally, I tried to get some beers from New England. And so I got 3 from New England. I have one from Cisco out of Nantucket, one from New York, kind of New Englandy. I think maybe it's New England technically, and Shipyard from Portland, Maine. And then on the complete other side of things, I got Uinta from Utah. So I'll kind of do them in this order and see how it goes. First beer I have here is the Pumple Drumkin, ale brewed with pumpkin and spice, and it's from Cisco Brewers in Nantucket. I've never had this beer before, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm not sure this was in the Chicago market last time. Trying to see if they have any alcohol by volume information on here. I don't think that they do, but they do have a cool little man who is a pumpkin. One other thing that I noticed on the label, it says pumpkin and spices, and I would say more than the actual pumpkin, it's the spices and the pumpkin pie and the Christmas cookie spices is what people now associate with pumpkin beer. And I can't think of a single time where I've had a pumpkin beer that is unspiced. So really, you know, I think it's as much about the things that we equate pumpkin with, which is, you know, pumpkin pie, than the actual pumpkin flesh itself and the taste of it. So very kind of golden copper color here. Not golden, I'd say copper, kind of a rusty burnt sienna. Nice little head going on here. Mild. It's a mild beer. Mild spice, mild flavor. My nose is also a little stuffed, so I'm just curious what I'm picking up on. I'm getting a really, maybe a slight nutmeg here, or an allspice. Sometimes those beers are hard, those two spices are hard for me to pick apart. Other than that, it's really no hops, very light, mild malt to it. You know, a little bit of kind of like a caramel flavor, but light. So, very easy drinking beer here. You certainly get a little bit of the spicing and a little bit of the vegetable pumpkin flavor. It's pretty highly carbonated, so it does kind of, you know, sting a little bit on your mouth, but that's not really from the bitterness. I think it's more from the carbonic acid and the carbonation. And really, as you're drinking, you're like, oh, this is a nice kind of malty amber ale, something like that. And then as you exhale, you get a little bit more of that. I'm getting like almost like a toasted allspice, something like that. It's got a little bit of a kick to it, not quite to the cinnamon level or anything like that. Very mild. You know, it's fine. I think there's a little bit of harshness to the spicing that's going on here personally. I would like to see the malt bill boost it up a little bit, and hey, a little bit more pumpkin flavor as well wouldn't hurt. Like I said, there is some actual pumpkin flavor here, which is more than you get from some beers. Some just really hit you over the head with all the spicing. So I do always appreciate that you can actually taste some of the pumpkin. Solid beer. I mean, it's decent. It's not rocking my world, but you know, good starter to it. I'll give the Pumple Drumkin an 88. So, you know, solid, but nothing too crazy. The next is Post Road Pumpkin Ale, which is by Brooklyn Brewing. So a lot of people don't know that this is brewed by Brooklyn because they have such iconic branding on their 12-ounce bottles, and really this is the only one that I can think of that goes away from that kind of B, that cursive B branding. But This is another ale brewed with pumpkin and spices, 5% alcohol. A little bit lighter, but again, a really brilliantly clear orange color to it. This one really quite orange, going a little bit more into the golden, kind of a copper, polished copper look, and a really nice, attractive off-white head to it. Nice looking beer. Okay, so much more spicing going on here. I'm getting a little bit of nutmeg and allspice, a little bit of vanilla. I'm also getting, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't think it's cinnamon. I think it's more, yeah, allspice and vanilla. Really nice. I'm trying to pick out the pumpkin, and it's hard to. I mean, the spicing is a little bit heavier. I do get some of the underlying malt body, but really the spicing here is dominant. No hops, anything like that. Nice, easy drinking beer. Again, a little bit more heavily carbonated than I was expecting. That's fine. Perhaps that doesn't kind of it kind of helps clean your palate. You're not sitting there with just some spices on the end, because I'm noticing that is kind of the aftertaste. These beers are generally fairly light in terms of body and malt and hop character. So what you're really left with is some of that spice. And it can be a little bit harsh, so maybe that higher level of carbonation helps kind of wash that, scrub that off your tongue. Again, it's a fairly light-bodied beer. There is a little bit more pumpkin flavor and quite a bit more of the spicing. Everything that came through in the nose is really there on the palate as well. Let me just take one more sip. Yeah, so as you're drinking it, I mean, just because of the heavy aromatic quality of the spices, you're really starting to smell it as you're tasting it. So the first thing you get is the spices. When you kind of get it in your mouth, you know, there is a little carbonation in there. It's kind of prickly on your tongue, but then you taste some actual pumpkin. It's really nice, almost like a little bit of a roasted pumpkin, and then the spicing comes back in and kind of marries it out. Finish is very clean. I mean, there's very little bitterness to speak of. It's mainly coming from the spicing, and I'm picking up mainly, I believe, allspice. Like I said, I'm not an expert in what's the difference between allspice versus nutmeg. You know, cinnamon can also kind of be close. In fact, there's a very good chance that they're all in there, and vanilla as well. Regardless, nice, easy drinking beer at 5%. I think it would go very well with a lot of kind of typical fall food as well. Something I would definitely order out at a bar or at a restaurant, rather, when I'm eating some kind of more heartier fall meals. For some reason, I think some of this spicing would go really well with Brussels sprouts, which also kind of have a bitter end to it. So that said, I like this beer. If I gave this an 88, I'm definitely going to go, 90 on this one. You know, we're starting to get into B+ A- territory there. So I do like it. It's a solid effort. Nice beer. Well done. Okay. Next is the Uinta. Let's see how the Western guys can do the pumpkin beers. This is the pumpkin, not to be confused with the Dogfish Head pumpkin. Very similar names here, but it's P-U-N-K''N versus P-U-N-K-I-N from the Dogfish Head Brewery. Again, all these beers are very fresh. They just kind of hit the market recently. I'm not really too concerned about freshness with a seasonal beer. The only time you would really be concerned with that is if it's, you know, in a springtime. I mean, these beers should hold up for a little while, or if for some reason you're tasting last year's beer, but that really doesn't happen too often. Okay, Uinta Pumpkin out of Utah. Where in Utah are they? Let's look. organic pumpkin and organic spices. Oh, is it organic? No. I guess the barley is not, and the hops are not organic. Anyway, let's see where they're from. I forget. Uinta Brewing Company, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to look any longer. Somewhere in Utah. It's got to be one of a few places. This reminds me in color very much of the Post Road. That kind of polished copper color. Really brilliantly clear orange. Very nice. Not quite as much head as the Brooklyn Post Road had. So we'll see if that comes across when you're actually drinking it. This one's got a very different spice profile to it. I mean, it's got something like the allspice going, but it might have some cinnamon as well, and even something more. There's something else going on here, something a little bit more floral. You know, it's definitely got that gingerbread quality to it. Maybe it's ginger. I don't know. Yeah, there's definitely something else going on. Could be ginger. Yeah, it's nice. It does have a little bit more of that bite. Maybe it is from ginger. I don't know. It's nice. Again, this is the first time I have had this beer. This beer is a little bit heavier bodied than the previous two. Still, you know, a medium bodied beer to put it, you know, very conservatively. This is more still on the lighter side, drinkable. I again think that the spicing is well integrated with the malt. It's just a little bit different. It's more on kind of the ginger cinnamon side than the kind of that vanilla nutmeg thing going on. You know, all these beers are, like I said, going to be about the blend of spicing more often than the actual pumpkin. Let me take one more sip and see if I can get some pumpkin in here. Yeah, there's a little bit of a vegetal quality in there as well. You kind of have to search for it, but it's there. Regardless, I like this beer. It's a little bit more bitter on the back end than the other two as well. That could be from the spicing as much as from the hops, and my guess is it probably is. But I like it. It's nice. I'm going to give this guy a 90 as well. I like it about as much as the Post Road, and it's an interesting interpretation. It's a little bit different use of the spices than the Post Road. But, you know, all said and done, I like it. It's a good beer, and it is one that I would be drinking. Now, I do think that I would maybe want to drink this one by itself a little bit more readily than I would the Post Road. Not saying it's better or worse. It's just, I kind of thought of food when I drank this, and I didn't really necessarily think of food when I drank this one. Maybe a cookie, but all these you could have with a cookie. Finally, we have the Smashed Pumpkin Ale from Shipyard. I guess this is technically called Pugsley's Signature Series Smashed Pumpkin. Shipyard out of Portland, Maine actually makes 2 pumpkin beers. Their regular one, I think, is called Pumpkinhead. Very light, mild pumpkin beer. I think more along the lines of these, perhaps the most like the Cisco, from what I remember. And then they have kind of their Imperial Pumpkin beer called Smashed Pumpkin. Last year, I had an Imperial Pumpkin called Pumpkin, which people know and love. And that beer is like drinking a glass of pumpkin pie, basically. So I wanted to do something like that as well, since so many of these pumpkin beers can be pretty mild and easy drinking beers. I think that's one of the reasons people like them so much. But for every once in a while, you know, you might get a 6-pack of this and have a couple in a night. But then, you know, after, you know, a holiday meal on Thanksgiving or something, you might want to be smacked in the head with pumpkin, and that's why some of these bigger Imperial pumpkins have also become quite popular. So let's see if that's what we're getting here. You know, this has also become kind of its own little style. I was saying before, is this going to come off, or did the foil mess up the? No, there it goes. What was I saying? Oh, I was mentioning before how, you know, American style, throw anything onto Imperial, and it's an American style, but the pumpkin beer is actually a traditional colonial style. Well, now it's both, because they've just taken a pumpkin beer and made that an Imperial as well. So, you know, they've kind of got it on both sides that way. Wow, really sticky cap. Like I said, Shipyard out of Portland, Maine. Just had a Portland, Maine beer from Maine Brewing Company. Oh, it was a twist off. Duh. That's why it was so much. Give me so many problems. A lot of beers up in Portland, Maine. A lot of breweries. You got Allagash, you got Gary's, you've got Shipyard, you've got the Maine Beer Company, which I had the Peeper Ale, which was very nice. I did a show about a couple episodes ago. So, a lot of stuff going on there. All these beers have just been crystal clear. Really, really lovely looking beer. This is just fall leaves, autumn, burnt sienna. Really, really nice looking beer. Just a little bit of a head here. Excuse me, not just a little bit, but you know, not fluffy. This is a 9% beer, so you know we're getting into the territory of almost twice as alcoholic as the previous ones. So let's take a sniff. Interesting. So, you can tell very quickly that this beer is much bigger. There's a lot more sweetness to this beer. I'm getting mainly a malt sweetness as well. I get some vegetal quality, but really I get almost some floral notes as well. I'm getting like like rose, something like that. A little bit of almost like artificial fruit flavoring, like an artificial cherry, something like that. I'm not getting as much spicing, which really surprises me. I thought this was going to be a spice bomb, kind of like Pumpkin is, but it's not. It's much more subtle, at least in the aromatics. On top of that, I do get some like cream. I get a little bit of spicing and cream, but not a lot of cinnamon, allspice, nutmeg. Very subdued on that. Much more just kind of a creamy floral and some vegetal notes as well. Getting hotter in these lights. It's a big beer. A little sticky sweet, a little. I mean, it's not over. All right, so it's not cloyingly sweet, but the sweetness there is kind of like a sticky sweet, like a candied sweet, like a candied apple rather than a caramel apple. It's got definitely has some spices. I'm going more back to the vanilla nutmeg thing here. Not really any cinnamon. I'm not even getting much allspice or something like that. There is pumpkin. I'm getting it more as kind of a vegetal note. I mean, whenever you do that, that's not really a good sign. I personally would have a problem drinking an entire glass of this beer. I just don't think it works for me. I think the kind of medicinal sweetness to it, almost like a Robitussin-y element to it, that kind of weird cherry flavor that's got that odd tang on the back end. That's what I'm getting here. The spicing is fine, but it can't get over that odd sweetness. I think that kind of blows everything out of the water here. So what is it really worth kind of going into the tertiary flavors going on? You know, it just does not work for me at all. In my new, more difficult scoring, you know, I'm gonna have to go, oof, boy, you know, 80, C minus, you know, I mean, definitely below average. You know, it's not very poor. I'm not gonna say it's a D, but you know, C minus. I'm just not feeling this beer. Yeah, overall, I'm gonna have to go with these two as my favorites. I do think they stood out from the rest, and I think they're fairly attainable across the country. I mean, between Brooklyn and Uinta, you should be able to find one of these beers. And that's good. They're nice, and they're nice six-pack beers. You know, if you're gonna have some food, maybe pick up this one. If you just want to try it on yourself, pick up this one. Either way, or hey, go against what I say and try it the other way around. Yeah, that's about it. I'm going to dump out my beer and even give it a rinse because I don't want any of that weird pumpkin Robitussin. Maybe that's a new flavor that they're going for, and that's what they the pumpkin Robitussin. They poured some in there. I'm gonna give myself some post road. And say thank you as always for watching these shows. I always appreciate it. Please leave your comments to me. I like to hear what you guys have to think. I would love to know what pumpkin beers you guys enjoy. They're at this point being made all over the place. It's one of the most popular seasonal offerings now for craft breweries. So let me know what you guys like, what style of pumpkin beer you like, and who you like them from. But until I hear from you guys, I've got to go because I've got some great pumpkin beer to drink, and hopefully you do too.